Welcome to Life, Love, and Jesus as we're continuing our journey through God's Word following a chronological plan from Blue Letter Bible. Now, that plan, if you want to follow along, is in the show notes. The link is in the show notes. And also in the show notes, if you're interested, is that sign up for my email list. My email subscribers, after we finish every book we're going through this year, they receive a one-page overview of that book. Now, several of them have obviously gone out already, but you, if you subscribe now, will also get the password where you can get all of those older overviews in a resource library that I call the treasure trove. So if you're interested in those study resources, just sign up for my email list. Again, the plan we're following and the link to my email are both in the show notes. And with that said, let's just dive into today's content. We are in two different books today. We are in the book of 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles. We are in the last chapter of 1 Kings, chapter 22, where we are kind of ending the life story of King Ahab, who was a wicked king in the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. And we're just going to look at this content. It is very, very similar in these two different books. So we're going to start with 1 Kings chapter 22, and I'm just going to point out a few things. Now, if you remember anything about Ahab in our previous videos, he was a wicked king. His wife was Jezebel. He was confronted many times by prophets, including the prophet Elijah, because of his wickedness. And the last chapter we had read regarding him in chapter 21 of 1 Kings, he arranged for, or his wife arranged for, but he was ultimately responsible for the murder of a man named Naboth because he wanted Naboth's vineyard. And so this is how evil he is, that he just takes what he wants without regard to anybody else. He's a murderer, he's an idolater, he's just a wicked person. And now we're in chapter 22, and we're seeing how his life ends. And so let's just pick up with the content here. Now, he is king in Israel, the northern kingdom, and Jehoshaphat is king in Judah, the southern kingdom. And they come together to form an alliance to go to battle. And before they go to battle, Jehoshaphat says, we need to inquire of the Lord. And so King Ahab brings in some prophets, false prophets, that tell him, go ahead, everything's going to be great. And then Jehoshaphat is like, well, I'm not sure. Is there anybody that's like really a prophet of the Lord that we can ask? And so this other guy comes in and he tells the kings that this is not a good idea. They should not go to war. And it's not going to turn out well for either of them. But they go ahead and do it anyways. And that prophet, his name is Zedekiah, and he tells the truth to these two kings, one wicked king, one good king, who is in this moment making bad choices, evil choices to go against the Lord. And then they go to battle, and what ends up happening is Ahab says to Jehoshaphat, why don't you go in as king, and I will go in disguised as just a regular soldier, because the Syrian army is not really looking for you. They're looking for me. And you'll be safe, you'll be fine, but I'll be in danger if they know I'm the king they're looking for. And so that's what happens. And I love verse 34 in chapter 22, which says, they're in the battle, and it says, a certain man drew his bow at random and struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. So he's out there pretending to be just another soldier, and at random, it says, a soldier draws his bow and shoots an arrow, and it hits him between his armor and his breastplate. I love the fact that it says at random, because we know that with our God, nothing is random. That arrow was directed by the Lord himself to its target. And Ahab ends up dying as a result of that wound. And that is a fulfillment of several prophecies. You can read the whole chapter to see it all. So at the end of chapter 22, we also read that Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, dies not long after this battle as well, and his son, who is Ahaziah, becomes king. Now, I will mention here again, I've said it before, that originally the books of First King and Second Kings were one book. And long before the birth of Christ, they were divided by scribes into two separate books. And they were divided like that just for ease of copying and storing, because they were handwriting everything out on scrolls, on parchment. But the break in the books here just seems a little awkward, because Amaziah's reign is started at the end of First Kings, but it continues, most of it is in Second Kings. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Remember, it used to be just one book. And then we're going to flip very quickly over to Second Chronicles chapter 18, which is really very parallel with what we just read in First Kings chapter 22. It is the same exact story. Jehoshaphat and Ahab going to battle together, inquiring of the Lord, the false prophets telling them everything's hunky-dory, and then Ahab going into battle disguised as a soldier and eventually dying. However, after Ahab is hit by the arrow in chapter 18, it says in verse 31, as soon as the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, and these are the enemies, they said, "It is the king of Israel." So they turned to fight against him, and Jehoshaphat cried out, and the Lord helped them. God drew them away from him. For as soon as the captains of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. And then the random soldier, like we had read in First Kings, draws his bow and shoots the arrow that causes the death of Ahab. And that is the end of Ahab. I want to flip back just for a moment to First Kings chapter 22. There's a couple things I want to point out to you. I had mentioned earlier that the true prophet came and told them not to go to battle, and he ended up paying with his life. And I just wanted to point out to you that in verses 24 and 25 of chapter 22 in 1 Kings, that Zedekiah, when he prophesied defeat, that one of the false prophets comes and strikes him on the cheek and says, "You should not be saying such things," basically. And that Zedekiah stayed true to God's word during that time. And then a few verses later, he is put into prison by King Ahab, and he still would not recant what the word of the Lord said. He would not give a better prophecy just because he was going to prison. And I just want to point that out, that Zedekiah was faithful to the Lord even at great personal cost. And I just think that's something we need to be encouraged by as people of God, to be faithful to him no matter what the cost is to us. And that could be something as simple as embarrassment, or as big as being disowned by your family, or losing a job, or even in other countries of being at the cost of your lives or the lives of your family members. But staying true to the Lord has great reward, not always in this life, but always in the next life. That's our content for today. And then after our content, we always go to our 3 questions. What do I learn about the Lord? What do I learn about myself? And what do I need to obey, change, or do because of what I have learned in God's Word today? And I'm just going to share with you very quickly my answer to question number 1. What do I learn about God? God is never swayed by the opinions of others. He hates lies and deceits. So remember, all the false prophets were saying, just tell the kings good things. And the kings wanted to go to war. They wanted to be victorious. And God had a word that was contrary to all of that. He is never swayed by the opinions of others, or the desires of others, or the wants of others. He has his plan. He will do what is right and do what is true, regardless of what humanity, individuals, or groups of people desire or want or ask for. because He is God. He is the one on the throne. And He hates the lying and the deceit that often accompanies the going against His word, which is what exactly we saw in these chapters. So that was my answer for today. I hope you're keeping your journal and writing your answers down. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you'll be back here again with me tomorrow as we continue our journey through God's Word, and that you will have a wonderful day as you live for and walk with the Lord.